So thank you everyone for joining today. We're just going to kind of go through today a brief agenda regarding the new Level 7 gaming apprenticeship and discuss how it works, a little bit of the technical aspects of it, how the training plan will alongside each other, and then we will have an open 30-minute, hopefully, Q&A at the end for you to ask any questions to any of the panelists we've got here today. So we'll start with just a few introductions. So my name's Beth and I'm one of the Senior Business Development Managers here at Kaplan. I've been in the apprenticeship industry now for around 6-7 years and should be well suited to answer any questions regarding funding, recruitment or anything of the such. Jason, do you want me to hand over to you next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. My name's Jason and I'm the Apprenticeship Development Director here at Kaplan. Kaplan works with around about 1 million learners a year around the world across 30 different countries, employs around about 20,000 people in those countries. And in the UK, we're one of the largest apprenticeship providers around. We have around 14,000 apprentices on program with us right now across accountancy and tax, banking and financial services, and data and technology. I head up all of the data and technology apprenticeships here, and obviously I'm working very closely with the partners on this call to make this apprenticeship happen. So yeah, that's me. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Ian, over to you next.
Yeah, for those that don't know me, my name's Ian Goodall. I own Aardvark Swift, which is the specialist games recruitment agency. We've been around for about 30 years, I think now. And I also run Grads in Games as well, which is the sort of specific talent pipeline initiative, which helps put mainly graduates and FE students into the games industry. So apprenticeships is something I've been helping and working on for several years now, I think. So it's good to see something like this come to fruition. So my role in this is to help recruit employees and employers onto the cohort.
Perfect. Thanks, Ian. And last but by no means least, over to you, Anders.
Thank you, Beth. And hello, everybody. My name is Anders, and I am the business developer of the Game Assembly. I'm currently based in Sweden, so I am in Sweden right now, but I think we'll manage. I will talk a little bit about the Game Assembly later on and the content and things like that.
Thanks, Brenda. So we'll kind of just have a brief overview of the course today. We'll ask some questions, direct them to certain panelists, and then, as I mentioned, we'll have an open planned 30-minute Q&A at the end for any of the attendees to ask any questions. But if you do have any in the meantime, feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll raise them as and when. So I think it's important to just mention that the Level 7 apprenticeship in the gaming industry is particularly a new apprenticeship. So I think it will be an important subject to kind of discuss how that apprenticeship came around. Now, Ian, I know you were heavily involved in that, so do you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of began as with a lot of apprenticeships, and it takes a while for these things to become a reality. So it began years ago now. I forget exact dates and days, but it's something that Jacob Habgood, I don't think Jake's on the call today, is actually speaking to different people about how to make apprenticeships more accessible to employers right now. But he was the guy that kind of led the trailblazer, which for those of you that know anything about apprenticeships, you know that it has to begin with a trailblazer group, where you pull a group of companies together that want to create a standard, which is what we've got now. Jacob and I had spoken about apprenticeships many times, so he asked me if I wanted to get involved in that trailblazer. My role again in that was to find like-minded people and studios that wanted to help create a program in apprenticeship. So that's where it began really several years ago. The reason it's a level 7, which is obviously a high level, and that's a master's level for apprenticeships. Me personally, I think that apprenticeships are the future in terms of helping with diversity, helping to create pathways. This is going to be a high level, so it's not going to be something that increases massive numbers in terms of pathways, but it needed to start somewhere. And I think certainly from Jacob's point of view and from other studios' point of view, level 7 gives us a way of upskilling existing programmers and the graduates that are out there that perhaps aren't quite good enough yet when it comes to C++ and games programming to be on projects. So it seemed to fit to launch this at that level. So yes, that's where it came about. So Jacob and I worked with another 10 or 12 studios, small, medium, indie, mobile. We needed a broad range, tech, sort of different types of studios, to try and work out what the role of a game programmer would be. So yeah, that's the background, and fair play to Jake. He deserves all the credit for getting the standard made. So I'm not going to claim any credit for that. There's months and months of work, and he's now running it himself at Sumo, I believe, similar sort of timescales to us. So we're all on a bit of a journey together, I think.
Perfect, thanks Ian. And I think it's kind of important to mention there, so Kaplan, while just doing it from a Sumo digital perspective, Kaplan are the only training provider currently out there that can offer this apprenticeship. Now, you know, we know that the gaming sector is really niche in its own industry, which is why we have partnered with the Games Assembly to deliver it. So Prandis, do you just want to go into a little bit about the partnership that we have there and how that works?
Certainly. First, I could just mention a little bit about the Game Assembly that we started in 2008 in Sweden, that there weren't schools for the Swedish games industry. So actually there are, it's based from the very beginning from people within the industry who created this school, and we developed it further on. The collaboration with Kaplan will be that we will be responsible of the content and the delivery of this course or this program. So we will be having a teacher from the Game Assembly, and that's, yeah, more or less from our part. I would also like to say that this is is based on the Swedish game programmer program, and we tweaked it a little bit and made it a little bit more advanced, since this is a level 7 course as well.
Yeah. Prandis, just to jump in there and add a bit of credibility, you've been running that program for a while now, and you've had some successful students from that course. Is that right?
Yeah, as I said, we've been doing this since 2008, and without boasting that we are today considered since 2017 one of the best schools in the world for game developers. We focus very much on creating developers, not only the occupation. So we're not only thinking about that they should be a programmer or an artist or anything like that, but they should work together and become a team. So that's a big part, and that is something that also will be reflected in this program as well, a little bit how they work in team and stuff like that. And I think that just to give a number, at around 95% of all the students that are finishing our studies are hired within after 6 months.
Yeah, and I think that's really good, isn't it? The fact that they're actually getting hired on the back of it, shows they've got those employability skills. That's great. So then, Jason, over to you. Can you just kind of talk us through a little bit about why Kaplan actually decided to deliver this apprenticeship? Because, like I say, obviously we are the only ones in the market currently delivering it, and it's definitely something to add there.
Of course, yeah, no problem. So I want to just start by mentioning a couple of partners, if I can. So clearly, Kaplan didn't necessarily have contacts with lots of the game studios here in the UK. So the partnership basically encompasses more than just Kaplan and the Game Assembly. Clearly, you know, Ian's here from Aardvark Swift and Grads in Games. We're also working with Into Games as well, and people may know Declan from Into Games too. You have clearly lots of links with lots of game studios around the UK. So that was an initial kind of really key factor for us, you know, who has relationships with the game studios, who works with them already, knows what they're looking for, etc. That was a really crucial part. So we're really grateful that Ian and Declan are involved in this. That's a real big plus for us. Clearly, when it came to the knowledge of the program, we needed an expertise in that area. And Prandis, he's mentioned about the Games Assembly. I think he is being quite modest in terms of, you know, the reputation that the Games Assembly has in Sweden, and now more sort of around the world now as well, and work clearly with a number of game studios in Sweden who also have, you know, a presence in the UK as well. And actually, organizations were crying out for people, you know, with these skills. There's a real shortage of people, you know, in this area. Organizations wanted them. At Kaplan here, I'm responsible, as I've said, for data and technology. So we have programs in things like business analysis, data analysis, IT, DevOps, software development, etc. And it seemed like a natural progression for us when we've got our software developers at level 3 and at level 4. Where do they want to go? What do they want to become? And clearly, the games industry is such an exciting industry, particularly here in the UK. And it was an area for Kaplan that we were really excited about. But it was an area where we absolutely needed to partner with others with more expertise in this area, and hence the reason for working with Ian, Declan, and Parandas. I think between all of us, Kaplan's expertise in apprenticeships, we are one of the largest apprenticeship providers in the UK. We've got around 14,000 apprentices with us, right now on all sorts of different programs. That's really beneficial to bring that to the table in terms of, this is a new venture for the Games Assembly in the UK. It's not new for them in terms of this kind of program, but certainly the apprenticeship and the way apprenticeships work in the UK is slightly different. So we can bring that to the table. Ian and Declan can bring to the table their knowledge of the sector and working with all the game studios, and Parandas, with his reputation at the Games Assembly and the kind of programs they're used to designing and developing and building. I think that's like a really nice, consortia, if you like, of organizations that can help get this program up and running.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. I think we've got a nice little mix there, haven't we? People that can help in all aspects of whether it's you're already embedded in the program or whether you are struggling for talent in those particular areas, then you can either obviously approach, Ian, and I can guarantee he'll be more than happy to help you look for new talent in those areas. So I think in regards to the attendees who've got on the call today, a lot of them were quite keen to understand a little bit more about the concept of what was actually covered from a course content perspective. So, what are the learners really going to learn and engage during this apprenticeship? So, Parandas, I suppose that's going to be one for yourself.
Certainly. If we look at it in a broader perspective, how the program is done, they could do both, or they will understand both. There will be software programmers, of course, but they will understand tech when it comes to engines and stuff like that. I think that's important, and that's something that we use in Sweden as well, that they are quite skilled in programming, but to be this a little bit extra skilled, they need to understand an engine, and not only like a Unreal engine or something, that their own engine. Then they can work in Unreal without problem as well. So I think that's one thing that's worth taking in mind. When it comes to the modules, like for example, the first module, when it's the introduction of C++, it's more that some people have learned maybe by themselves, some maybe have been in school or something like that, but we also want them to have some sort of a same language, so they understand each other when they continue on this program. So it will be like 1.5 weeks, and it will include like arrows and references and computer vocabulary and arrays and everything that's the base of C++. And of course, one thing that we will also focus on is, I think you say like that, how to troubleshoot data, how you look for errors, because I mean, it's not only for a programmer, of course, he has to code, it's to find those errors and make them better and fix them. So that is also something that we will do in the introduction. And with that, we will have X amount of exercises, quite demanding exercises, to be honest, but that's the only way that they will be top-notch later on. And that is more or less the introduction of that course.
Yeah. So I think they'll go on and learn different kind of streamlined paths along the way, won't they? But ultimately what we're trying to do is embed, certain learning skills from the get-go, so that they're not going into the business essentially completely fresh. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, I would. Straight on, yes.
Yeah, amazing. So in terms of, I suppose, more on the apprenticeship front, Jason, probably one for you, more on the delivery of how that's done. So how Kaplan on the delivery of the tuition, how that's structured throughout the duration of the course, just so suppose both the learners and employers can understand exactly how that'll look.
Yeah, for sure. No problems at all. So first thing to say, I mean, Piranda's kind of touched upon it there. The level 7 game programmer, there are 2 pathways within it. So you have what's called there's the core element of the apprenticeship, and then you can specialize in one of 2 areas. So for instance, there are 15 duties overall that this apprentice will go through and obviously get exposure to during their time, with us on the apprenticeship. There are 9 that are core that everyone does, regardless of the kind of role they're in. And then there's a specialism, and each of those have an extra 3 cores, whether they're a software programmer or whether a technology programmer. There are then 3 that they will then kind of specialize in, if you like, as part of the program, to add to what Pirandas has said there. In addition to that, there's what's called knowledge, skills, and behaviors. So an apprenticeship is made up of the knowledge. What do you want people to be able to know? The skills. What do you want people to be able to do? And then the behaviors, almost how do you want them to go about, doing that? So for instance, in here, there are 26 different knowledge components that we will work through with them. There are a further 27 skills and a further 7 behaviors. And all of these are listed and detailed out, etc. And what we'll be doing with Pirandas is we'll be mapping each of those units and those modules he's just mentioned to those knowledge, skills, and behaviors to make sure each of those are covered off at various points during the apprenticeship. And the behaviors, things about being resilient, taking ownership, being abreast of what's going on in the industry. The behaviors are kind of fairly, I don't want to say standard, but if you think they can often apply in lots of situations, you often want people in your organization who you have those attributes. Clearly, the skills and the knowledge is where the real technical components come in. Piranda's mentioned there that there are kind of blocks. That the way an apprenticeship works, everyone, is that you're supposed to spend, on average, 6 hours per week learning towards your apprenticeship program. But I say that's on average because, for instance, Piranda's mentioned there that the first module is 8 days in a live virtual class with us, with a Kaplan class led by a games assembly tutor. If you imagine those 8 days, it's almost like if you were taking kind of literally for the next 6 or 7 weeks, they almost wouldn't have to do anything on their apprenticeship because they've got that kind of block of 8 lots of 6 hours at least right at the outset. So for instance, across the program, which is 18 months, by the way, it's an 18-month program with a further 6 months when they're in Gateway, which we can talk a little bit more about later on. There's an average of 414 guided learning hours that they will go through. Around about 50 days will be in class. So again, the program we're working on with Pirandas will be around about 50 days in class, broken into those blocks. That first block is 8 days. That's, month 1. In month 2, there's a further class, which will be around 5 days. And we will take them for blocks of time across that 18-month period. And some of those things are still being finalized because there's 1 or 2 of them where we say, is this stuff they should do in advance of the class? So there's a baseline that they all come with, or is this stuff that should be included in the classroom itself? So that number of days, may alter slightly. But if you imagine 50 days in a live online class spread across that 18 months, that equals around about 300 to 320 hours of that 414 that you have to do. The rest of it is made up by projects. And again, this is something the Games Assembly has done, really well in Sweden, has been the use of projects, whether they're simulated projects that the Games Assembly will work through, with the learner, or in some instances as well, there'll be real projects that the learner is doing, and they should be delivering real value back to the business. And the great use of those is that additional kind of 100 hours that we need across that 18 months. They'll be made up typically of those projects that they'll be working on, which, as I say, the good thing is they should be delivering real value back to the business as well by completing those projects during their time with us.
I think just, credit where credit's due as well. You've done a fab job of implementing the rest of our IT and digital courses here at Kaplan on an apprenticeship front, and they are all run by that delivery method. And the feedback we get by employers and learners is that they are really able to then go back into the business, and because they've learned something fundamentally new, they're really able to apply that when they go back. So they have that downtime to kind of get to grips with everything they've learned before actually moving on to a new subject matter.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about, applicability to the workplace. So, we can teach them some foundational concepts, they can come to the live online class where they will learn more, and there'll be labs as well. It's also worth adding that, you know, during the class we've built a virtual machine, which is really powerful. It's, you know, multiple processors, really high spec in terms of RAM, etc. So all they need is a web browser to attend the class. They come to the class using their web browser. They can launch the virtual machine that we've got prepared for them and do a lot of their practical in there as well. They also have access to that 180 days after each class. So as each module finishes, there's a further 180 days where they continue in that lab environment and practice and play and try stuff in a safe environment, and, you know, not worry about breaking something, etc. So that's really important to add as well.
Yeah, and I think that probably, you know, a few of the questions we've had from some employers have been around that confidentiality piece of, you know, if they're working on particular games, are they going to have to share them with us? Are they going to have to share them with classes? So Ian, I know you had quite a good conversation with Jacob regarding that. Do you want to just go into that a little bit, just to kind of give us a bit of clarity on how we look around that?
Yeah, I can do. Yeah, I think it's, I had a chat with Jake this morning about it, because obviously we're talking about projects and things, and spending time working on stuff that's in studio. So, I mean, I know more than anybody that studios are very, very hot on confidentiality, and there's not a lot of wiggle room sometimes in terms of what people are allowed to release and not release. So I've got some notes that Jacob sent to me that I'll probably stick them in the chat, funnily enough, because I think word for word it'll probably make more sense from Jake than it might do from me. But his advice on this was that the portfolio is very heavily sort of curated anyway over the course of 12 months. So there's plenty of opportunity to pick and choose what goes in there, redact information if it's needed. He talks about the project as well. Just reading this now, saying that the project in itself is sort of 2 or 3 months work at the end of the apprenticeship, and that's got to meet a real business need. So that's probably where the problems could come in terms of confidentiality. But Jacob's sort of quite keen to say that it could always, more time can be put in extracting and redacting it, but still leaving it in a presentable form if that's required. So he's quite confident that can be sorted. He also makes the point that examiners on this course, the endpoint assessors and the examiners, they're going to be programmers from the games industry, is his comment to me. So that's something that I can appreciate is the case. And if they need to sign NDAs, they're going to be comfortable and used to signing NDAs, because a lot of these guys are going to be either programmers that work with games companies or contractors that maybe work for games companies as well. So it's not going to be any different to that. If they're taking on the role, they're going to be paid to do it, I assume. So they're going to have to sign NDAs, and they're going to be invested in this whole process. So they should be keen to make it successful and therefore not derail it by breaking NDAs, I suppose. So hopefully there's ways around any issues that are there.
There's a lot of background work done into those individuals as well to put people's minds at ease a little bit more as well. You know, it's not a case of just picking them off the shelf and thinking they've got the relevant experience. There's quite a lot of background gone into it. And I just think from a provider perspective also, obviously things will be shared with our talent coaches for assessments and things like that. So you know, I hate to land things on our legal team's desk, because I'm sure ours all work the same and they're all very busy, but you know, we're not shy to sign NDAs where required for particular clients either. Yeah. Thanks for that, Ian. Ian, I think I'm going to come back to you now, just to discuss a little bit about how you think this will actually benefit the learner space within the gaming industry, and how both employers, I suppose employers go around recruiting and learners really can put themselves forward for these types of roles.
Okay, yeah, I think it's an interesting apprenticeship, and I've spoken to quite a few people that are perhaps on the call about my thoughts on who could benefit and who would be suitable sort of students. It's a high-level program and apprenticeship, and it's not going to be easy, and that's always going to be something that was apparent with this level of course. So I think there are two types of learner that it could probably suit. There are the existing graduates who are out there that need to upskill, and there are also junior programmers within people's studios that this can apply to, that want to upskill, gain a master's qualification, learn new skills, etc., etc. So both of those people, or types of people, will inevitably benefit a lot from that. It will create jobs for graduates or people that want to get in at this level, but it will also create pathways and learning and development opportunities for existing staff. I think in terms of employers, there's a massive benefit there. One of the reasons why I suppose Jacob and I were quite keen to push this forward in terms of programming is that there's a huge demand for programmers. The games industry is desperately short of C++ programmers. There is not enough to go around. There hasn't been for 10 years, and that's 20 years, and that's got worse and worse in recent years as well. So there's a global battle for talent, and I think if you keep, many studios know that if you keep going into the market to find mid-level programmers or sort of second jobbers, third jobbers, it's a very expensive process. You're paying agency fees, you're paying your own internal talent people to find these guys or girls, and they're just not out there. There is not the amount out there. So from an employer's point of view, growing your own is the only option. And I think this is what this course allows you to do, is it starts to give you a good way of growing your own and developing your own experienced programmers that perhaps isn't quite available right now, unless you can coach this kind of stuff internally, which we know is a challenge for small studios, medium-sized studios, and even large studios to get this kind of thing going internally is tough. So lots of benefits, hopefully.
Definitely. And I think just a few of the employers that I've spoken with, they will do graduate recruitment kind of predominantly every year or every other year, depending on obviously the scalability and size of the business. But this apprenticeship, I think, will be fundamental in the graduate space. I think it'll be really good to embed this over your graduate program, as we've seen happen with other kind of programs in the past. So rather than you trying to learn this individual or your business ways and learn them everything new, you can actually just go alongside the graduate program with this apprenticeship, and then the educational piece is the kind of pressure is taken off the business.
Can I just add a point to that as well, Beth, if I may? Because I mean, I agree with both of you. I mean, it's absolutely spot on. The other thing I just want to add, though, is obviously you don't have to be a graduate in order to do this. So, you know, it's designed at level 7. There might be more on that later on. But this may also be really applicable to people who are currently working in your studio, already doing various roles, but perhaps haven't gone down the formal academic route of obtaining a degree in this area. So it's important to note really what we're saying the entry criteria is around a sort of level 3, 4. And we don't want to assume that everyone understands what those levels are. So just very quickly, a level 2 is sort of GCSE equivalent. A level 3 is sort of A-level, BTEC equivalent. A level 4 is foundation degree, HNC kind of level equivalent. So people can also come into the program at that level and still get onto the level 7 program if they can demonstrate certain capabilities.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, certainly, I've spoken to a couple of studios that have highlighted that they've got very capable QA people, for example, who are looking to move into these kind of roles, and they're confident that these guys have got the skills, but they've probably just not got the runway in terms of how to get them upskilled properly on the training. So, and they won't be. I'm pretty sure they won't be graduates. They certainly aren't code graduates. They're QA people that have perhaps had a dabble and had a play and been exposed to some stuff whilst in the studio. So it does open it up to a wide variety of people. I think it just depends what they'd have to assess what their capabilities are, and make sure that they're comfortable with the level that they're going to be pushed onto. But yeah, people can come from a wide background.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just from a Kaplan perspective as well, we do offer a free bespoke recruitment service if you are looking specifically to recruit those apprentices. So if you're looking, for example, to new gaming apprenticeships, then you can chat with one of us and we can talk you through the process of that, how that works. And that is a free service that we do offer here. I think, Jason, just going on to you next, just to understand the actual qualification that the learner will be left with at the end of the course, and how that kind of benefits both the learner and the employer. Yeah,
sure. So we just touched upon levels there in our kind of last comment. So yeah, a level 6 is a degree. It's an undergraduate degree. Think about a 3-year degree program. Year 1 is level 4, year 2 is level 5, year 3, is level 6 essentially. This is a level 7 program, which is a master's equivalent. You won't actually get a master's from a university. Some programs have what's called an integrated degree within them, where you actually get an actual master's from university or a degree from university. Some programs don't. This is one of those ones that doesn't. So it's a level 7, which is a master's equivalent. And that's the qualification that someone will get. And the certificates will be issued from the UK government in terms of the Education and Skills Funding Agency. There are 2 endpoint assessment bodies that we are chatting to and we'll be working with. So one is AIM awarding and the other is Innovate Learning. And Ian kind of touched upon this earlier on. It's those, that 18-month program they work through with us is where they're learning those knowledge, skills and behaviors that we discussed earlier. And in the final 6 months of the 2-year program is when we'll work directly with then either AIM awarding or Innovate Learning with those independent assessors who will then determine, whether somebody has successfully passed the apprenticeship. That's that kind of independence at the end. Employer has to sign off and agree this person's ready to go to endpoint assessment. I think that they are competent in all these areas, but then that third-party assessment happens as well. And just very briefly, there are 2 components to the endpoint assessment. One is a project with a professional discussion and presentation. So this is what Ian touched upon earlier. So this typically in that 6 months, it will typically take around about 12 weeks that they'll work through a real project, which delivers real value back to the business. They'll create a presentation off the back of it about what they've done and how they've done it and what the kind of output was. And that they'll have a 90-minute window to deliver that presentation to an independent assessor from either AIM or Innovate, who will then, grade that by asking them some questions as well, a minimum of 5 questions. And then the second component to the endpoint assessment is what's called a professional discussion, which is underpinned by the portfolio of evidence that you gathered over the 18 months that you've been working with Per-Anders and myself. So over that 18 months, we'll create evidence and put that in an evidence file as a portfolio. That will go to the independent assessor for them to review, and they'll have a minimum of 10 questions and a 90-minute window to answer those questions. And obviously they have to pass both elements to be awarded their apprenticeship.
Thanks, Jason. And I thought just before we do open to questions, it would be good just to touch upon kind of a funding element of how the actual apprenticeship is funded and what you can actually access in regards to that funding. So you do have kind of 2 different places depending on the size and the payroll essentially of your business. But for anyone on here that has a payroll of less than £3 million a year, ultimately the government would actually fund this apprenticeship programme. So they would fund 95% of the course fees, leaving you with only a 5% course fee per learner. Now that could be, you're bringing someone new in, it could be a graduate that's just started, or as Jason mentioned, it could be someone that's been in the business kind of 5 or 10 years, that's moved up the ladder and not actually had those formal qualifications. There's no stipulation there to either of those 3. There's no stipulation on age or anything like that. So essentially the course would come out at £950 per learner, and that will be that 5% fee. Overall, for anyone with anyone of a payroll of £3 million or more, you'll be currently contributing into something called an apprenticeship levy. Therefore, the cost of the course will be full cost, which is £19,000, but will be taken as a monthly payment out of your apprenticeship levy. Now, obviously, we'll send some follow-ups after today's call. I don't expect you to kind of be sponge and take all of that in, but we can have kind of Google Meets or Teams meetings, whichever is more applicable, to kind of explain that a little bit further as well. So conscious of time, but what we'll do now is just move on to a Q&A session. So I know a lot of people had quite a few questions regarding courses, content, costings, anything of the such. So if you want to pop any questions you've got in the chat box, and if you want to direct it to a particular panelist, if not, I'll just kind of see who I feel will be more relevant. So, Jason, I suppose probably one for you. We've got the obviously programme actually just start at the end of January. I believe it is it the 31st, is that right?
Excuse me, the 30th, we've got the 30th in mind, 30th of January for that first day in class. But prior to then, they would obviously complete the application pack. Beth, what can we do beforehand? An application pack will open up. There's something called, during that application phase, there's what's called a role suitability assessment, just to make sure that the learner will get sufficient exposure to the knowledge, skills and behaviors that the standard requires. And there's also what's called a skills scan. What we want to try and do is measure the start point of every learner, because mean, one of the guys mentioned earlier, I think it may have been Parandas, sorry if it was you, Ian, but, you know, some people will come in with a certain level of C++ knowledge already, and others might come in fairly fresh to C++, for instance. So there's a skills scan where we'll try and determine what everyone's start point is, so that we can tailor things, you know, very slightly for those people as well. So that's the kind of stuff we'll be doing between now and the end of January, when they'll attend their first class.
Yeah, and I suppose it's heavily dependent on if you're a learner or an employer. So if you're an employer, you do need to reach out to probably myself to get everything in place from more of a compliance point of view. So an apprenticeship and a service agreement to ensure that we can then provide the learner with the application link and they get that in preparation for January.
Yeah.
I think it's important to mention, obviously, with it being a January start and Christmas close down, realistically, we want learners' applications in by, you know, start mid of December at the very latest, to make sure they're all processed, there's no queries with eligibility or anything like that, and that will cement their date for hopefully an end of January start.
Exactly. Perfect.
Jason, probably over to you again. So what are the
Okay.
benefits of doing this kind of training through an apprenticeship as opposed to just doing it in-house?
Oh my gosh, how long have you got? I mean, the good thing about this, clearly, an apprenticeship, I was thinking, is a structured training program. You know, Ian mentioned earlier that this apprenticeship has been designed by employers, you know, from the gaming industry, and they've determined the duties, the knowledge, the skills, and the behaviors that somebody should be able to demonstrate to say that they're a competent game tech programmer or game software programmer. So to have those kind of standards set that you're working towards, I think is really crucial. To have those structured training days, I mentioned earlier, there'll be around about 50 training days in a live online class. Classes will be small, up to 20 maximum. To have that lab environment that we've created so that people can test and play and practice and make mistakes and, you know, not worry about them, etc. There's also benefits that the government have shown. The government done all sorts of research in this, as you can imagine, in terms of things like funding. If you're an apprenticeship levy payer, you've already paid for it. You know, why not use it? Why not get some, you know, value back from the investment you've made? You know, the levy, as you mentioned earlier, Beth, once it goes in, it's ring fence for apprenticeships only. If you haven't used that money, it gets taken back by Treasury and they'll spend it on something else. So if you're a levy payer, why not use it? If you're a non-levy payer, it's only £950. The government pay 95%.
Yeah, and I think just from a retention perspective as well, I know we
Yeah.
might have some learning and development and HR on here, but a lot of businesses are now looking at retention. How do they get those members of staff in and retain them? And what we found across our IT and digital apprenticeships is, I believe, Jason, right in saying it's 96% we currently hold on a retention rate.
Yeah, that's right.
Apprenticeships. So it's not only getting those good people in, it's training them, retaining them, and making sure that you have a platform of good talent to kind of carry on the business.
Yeah, exactly that, Beth. I was at a conference yesterday, you know, the war for talent. Ian mentioned it earlier. The war for talent it's harder than ever to recruit people. And actually one of the most common reasons people leave an organization is if they feel they're not getting invested in. And, you know, I had a really nice quote from a client recently, and it's a client, you know, Beth, I won't name them, but they said, I'd rather lose somebody for the equivalent of 6 hours a week to, you know, invest in them and develop them and make them, you know, better employees than lose them 100% of their time because they choose to leave the organization to go somewhere else who is willing to invest in them. I thought that was just like a really nice way to think of it.
Yeah, the main thing I think is the cost as well. I mean, without, you know, I'm a commercial animal, so I'll come right to the point and say that you can train this stuff in-house, and people are training this stuff in-house right now. There's people on this call that are delivering this stuff in-house that will have their own opinions on when they look at the training, what it covers and what it doesn't cover and everything else. But there's a cost to that. There might not be a very clear cost, but you're having to use your own staff to deliver that training. Those staff are going to be programmers, they're going to be managers of programmers, and those are people that could be working on projects. So if the training is of a high quality, and personally speaking, with Parandas and the games assembly involved, then I'm pretty confident that it's going to be delivered to a very high standard. Then if you can replace that and you can get that done for free, which effectively you can because you've paid your levy money, then why would you not use that money more wisely internally? And you can put that resource onto something else. So for those of you that are sitting there thinking, how do I go and justify this to my senior leadership team? Then that's one of the big things that I would be focusing on, is that they can redeploy that manpower somewhere else and get the same, if not better, level of training delivered, hopefully externally. So that's one of the big things for me.
Yeah, perfect. Eligibility question here. So clearly asked, if an employee has already completed a level 5 apprenticeship, can they do the level 7? I'm going to go with yes. So as long as they haven't directly done the level 7 pathway and it's been kind of the modules have been exactly the same, it should be fine for enrolment. But we will do eligibility checks upon application anyway. We've got when do applications open. So as I mentioned, what we would need to do is speak with obviously the employer, get an apprenticeship contract and a service agreement in place, and then we can send the application links out. Our applications are open for this course as of now, so they are already open. So what I'll start to do is get together all the paperwork for anyone that I've already spoke to. If you're already on this call, don't start to panic, and get everything sent out to you. And then we'll need to do is get you applying, and then we'll go through a processing application. We've got Liz here. Do you think every learner who joins is capable of achieving the level required? And what would happen to a learner who joins but struggling to achieve it? Jason? Yeah.
I'll go for that one first. Ferrandis, please jump in if you want to as well, particularly from the technical angle. But, clearly not every apprentice will achieve the program. But like I said, at the moment, we've got a 96% achievement rate on our data and technology apprenticeship. So we're pretty good. I think the start point is crucial, trying to understand at the very beginning someone's capability and their commitment, I suppose. This is going to be tough, tough work. It's you're working and learning at the same time. That's one of the big benefits of an apprenticeship, but it also means, it can be, a little tough at times too. We're there to support. I mean, that's the key thing, isn't it? Kaplan will have a talent coach assigned to the learner who will be looking after them, looking after their well-being. They'll meet with them every 6 weeks. And that will be with the line manager, the learner, and the Kaplan talent coach, who will meet with them to make sure that they're on track. What were the targets you set previously? Have you met them? Here's the targets we're going to set you next. Are there anything other that we need to know, in terms of additional support needs that you might have that we can help with? So all those support mechanisms are there and they're in place to support and help the learner to achieve. But we also have to be realistic and go, you know what, not 100% won't achieve. And that's pretty normal.
Yeah.
But we'll be there to support and get as many of those people as we possibly can through the program. But Ferrandis, sorry if you want to add something else more technical.
No, I mean, going back to earlier what I said, I mean, doing this since 2008, we've seen people fail and we've seen many people been successful, and our goal is to deliver great personnel or people to work within the industry. And I mean, there is one part that we don't talk about, and I mean, even our teachers, have another part of it, and that's to be supportive and help them and guide them. And going back to another question when saying, like, should we do this in-house? Yes, of course you can, but you also have this pedagogical point of view on it as well. And I do believe that our learners are quite good at that, to help them, support them, to understand to understand the code and go forward.
And I think from a Kaplan perspective as well, just speaking for more of the apprenticeship side, we don't just think, learners struggling, we'll let them kind of go either. We will give them that extra curriculum support where needed as well. Holly's asked, do we have any later start dates planned for the programme in 2023? So obviously we've got our 30th of January start date. Do we know what cohort we've got coming up and running after then?
So yeah, I mean, Ferrandis and I have discussed, it's really based on employer demand, but we do know we'll have a September start as well. So we've got the January start, the next one would be September. But actually on all of my other programs I have here, we start them every quarter. So, every 3 months we will start a new cohort. So if the demand is there, and again, this is something Ferrandis and I have discussed, if the demand is there to start this program each quarter, we will absolutely start it each quarter. But at the moment it's planned in for September. In fact, there's one employer who you're aware of, Beth, and again, I won't name them, who's talking about, could we do a June start for them? And there's a certain number of learners that they were thinking of, which might make us go, yeah, of course, we can do a June start for that particular employer where they've got a number of learners they want to put through the program. So it's based on employer demand.
Yeah, I think we have that good here where we can be flexible. flexible and open to those cohorts. I've had a few questions where people have asked, can we close cohorts? So for anyone on here, obviously that's been asking that question. We can run courses as and when, as long as we have general availability, and we can close that cohort. As obviously mentioned, there needs to be that minimum number requirement, which I think we're going with the lucky number of 15, 15 students to kind of close cohort. If you wanted it to solely focus on you, your business and areas, then that's what we will be looking at. As I mentioned, we're always open to those conversations as well. Any thoughts on companies employing apprentices remotely? I would be quite well suited to say one, because I speak to employers every day, and I think the more we speak to employers, the more that everyone is actually going remote. So currently we haven't found a reduction in leaver rate or failed rate because apprentices are remote. We are finding that it is becoming a new normal and there's not a negative impact being made on apprentices. Jason, I don't know if you've got anything to add there.
No, I think it's important that for the mentor is important within the organization. So we'll obviously have the tutor working with Parandas and the games assembly. There'll be the technical tutor, there'll be the talent coach. The other key person involved in this, as well as the learner, naturally, is the line manager or the mentor at the employer. And we'll work with them as well. As I mentioned earlier, every 6 weeks we'll meet as a 3, our talent coach, the line manager, mentor, and the learner, to understand how people are getting on. I think it's more important. I mean, I'm a manager. I manage a whole bunch of people here at Kaplan. I think it's even more important that you have regular contact with those people that are remote, and you have regular meetings with them, and you set, regular goals for them, etc. But actually, a good manager would have been doing that anyway, regardless of whether they were face-to-face or remote, if that makes sense. Like, it's probably just more important if someone's remote that you're looking after them, making sure that they know what they're doing, make sure they get the support they need, etc. And you have regular touch points and check-ins with them, is what I would say.
I'm pretty sure that depending on who comes forward and signs up for the initial cohort, and then on the ones after it, then looking at the sort of scope of the games industry right now, or the what's going on, then many of the learners will be working remote. Because that's just what's happening in certainly the larger studios. I think should juniors and grads and people be in the studio and getting sort of face-to-face mentoring? Yeah, probably. I'm sure they'll learn better, learn faster, but that's just, we're in a market now where people want to be working at home, they want to be hybrid, whatever. So there are many juniors that are onboarded remotely and working remotely. So I'm pretty sure that you won't be the only studio that has a remote student, if you like. So hopefully that should give some comfort to those that might be going through that process.
Yeah, perfect. Ross has asked, is there a specification for the course? So I think we do have some details, Ross. I'll share those with you after the webinar today. You did say you joined a little bit late, so Brandis did kind of run through early on some of the details. I'll share the recording link with you so you can watch that back, and just some details on the actual modules as well. We've got a solo developer eligible to participate in the apprenticeship. Jess, do you want to take that, or do you want me to take it?
I think Parandas or Ian, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know whether. Yeah.
I mean, I think obviously is it Sayed? I think that's asked the question. So you might need to have a follow-up question, maybe privately, or give us a bit more detail. I think it depends what you mean by solo developer. The apprenticeship system works basically where you have to have a job at a company and then carry out the apprenticeship as part of that job, which is that's my kind of simple way of explaining it to people, I suppose. So if you're talking about being an indie developer and you are self-employed, I'm not sure how that works. Beth and Jason would probably be better answering that question. What if you're a solo developer that wants to get a job at a studio, then that definitely works. If you're an indie developer working on your own that wants to access some training, then possibly, not sure. Do people do that on apprenticeships, Beth?
Yeah, so from a funding perspective, you have to be full-time employed. And obviously the other stipulation to it is you would need a mentor. So you essentially can't just be the only person working in the business, because then you wouldn't have someone to kind of run alongside as a mentor. So in short, I would personally say the answer would be no, but
Yeah.
definitely depending on situation. So as you mentioned, Ian, have that open dialogue, that area of support from a mentor perspective. So if you're working on your own, then you wouldn't be able to do that. We've got a few questions in the Q&A from Oliver. So can we get the CV of the people who will actually be delivering the training?
You broke up very slightly there, Beth, for me. Apologies.
Sorry.
Can you get the CV of the instructor? I think that was the question,
yeah.
was it?
Yeah.
It's probably one for Per Anders, I think, really. Can you, I don't know if Per Anders can give us any detail on the teacher.
Yeah, I can, but not fully, because it's a little bit secret. You need to sign the NDA. No, but it is actually someone who's been studying at the Game Assembly many years ago, and has been working professionally as a programmer in the UK for several years right now. That's more or less what I can say.
Yeah.
So what you're getting is a person with from our school, knowing our culture, how we're teaching the material already, but also for many years understand the UK industry and how you're working. And I think that's the best match we could ever get, to be honest.
Yeah, fab. And I think we're just in the process of kind of hiring that individual, aren't we? So there's not got a great deal of it we can share with you as of yet.
No.
So, but you know, in time you'll obviously get to grips with that. I think, speaking from experience, Jason, where we normally will recruit trainers and things, they're fully qualified themselves and then have worked in the industry for quite a while. So brilliant fairness and can reflect well with the learners because they've been through it themselves.
Exactly that. Yeah, exactly that. And I think Per Anders has found somebody great for this program. So we were delighted when this person accepted. So yeah.
Yeah, perfect. We've got here, our Kaplan the only provider in the UK to offer it. We have been approached by another company, SSTA, about the apprenticeship. I've never heard of them. Jason, are you aware of anyone? No?
I haven't heard of them. No. And obviously last time I looked at this, you have to be kind of approved to deliver it. And on the government website, you'd normally see who those approved providers are. And obviously, I mean, Ian mentioned earlier that Sumo Digital do this as what's called an employer provider, which means they can do it in-house for their own employees.
Yeah.
We, last time I looked, were the only provider with TGA who were kind of eligible to deliver this. Whether someone else is thinking of doing it and is trying to drum up interest to build a business case to then go and apply to be able to do it, or whether they've just gone on just recently in the last week or two and I've not seen them yet.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that one.
You may know more than us, Oliver. You may be in the know.
Yeah. So Oliver, I'm going to go with it. It is just a Kaplan thing as it currently stands, because we are the only one on the National Apprenticeship website delivering it. So you'll see Sumo Digital on there as well. As Jason just mentioned, they can only offer it to their internal staff as an employer provider, so it is slightly different. Start date of the programme, as I mentioned, for this one will be the 30th of January. What is the approach to deal with failure or poor engagement of the learner?
Kind of dealt with that, I think, already. It's just the support, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think we obviously support them throughout. We have different touch points throughout the kind of area of the programme to ensure that engagement piece is constantly monitored. And then what happens to the levy if someone leaves the company before they complete? So basically the way that funding is taken from your levy is 80% of the course cost is taken over the course duration, which for this course will be 24 months. So payment is taken down every 24 months, and then 20% is taken upon completion. So if, for example, your learner was to leave 6 months in, we would only take 6 months worth of funding from your levy, and then it would be stopped. You wouldn't pay the full course cost if, for example, the learner left and moved somewhere else or anything like that. So essentially your levy funds would just stop, whether they did 2 months or whether they did 20 months. You would only pay for the month the learner was physically on course with ourselves. We've got here, do you have any success stories to share from the test run? So Fran, does any success stories that you had from the Games Assembly?
I'm not sure. The test run, I'm not really.
Well, we've not got one, have we? This is this is the start, I think. Obviously,
Yeah.
Per-Anders has got success stories from his time and from his students on different courses at the Games Assembly. But I mean, this is the first ever cohort, isn't it? So we've not got any success stories as such yet.
Yeah. But Per-Anders, I see you said you've been running it since 2008.
Yeah,
so
I
Ian's spot on, but you'll have a number of success stories from doing this in Sweden.
I mean,
is there anything you can share, or?
Well, there are, I mean, most of our students, when they finish, when it comes to programmers now, I mean, I just received the info because we have a quite good alumni networking with all the students afterwards. And we have one person who's a technical director right now at DICE after a couple of years only. So, and I do think that if you haven't watched the video, but I think there is a Cloud Imperium says, for example, that when the students from the TJ enters Cloud Imperium, they are already in the mid-level. They're not even juniors. I mean, doing this for several years and delivering great, competent people for the games industry, I think that is in a success itself. I mean, that's our goal at the Game Assembly to deliver that.
And I did share a video with some of the attendees. Obviously, if you signed up in the last few days, you might not have got it, but prior to this, and it was a little bit like a case study video that the Games Assembly put together, and it's some of the learners talking about what they learn and how they found the learner journey. So I'll share that with everyone after the call today on our follow-up email as well.
Yeah, I think certainly from Lizzie's point of view, obviously Lizzie's someone I know quite well from my own dealings, and I think it'd be interesting for her to have a look at the courses and how the courses are run from the Games Assembly. I don't know, without speaking to her privately, I'm sure I will, how much detail she knows about what they teach, but Lizzie and I have talked for hours and hours and hours about what should be taught, how it should be taught, and I can reassure her that when it comes to the Games Assembly and the way that they teach games, it kind of picks up on lots of the mistakes that are made by UK institutions in terms of how they teach games. So if the apprenticeship runs in the same way, which I think is what Per-Anders is saying, is that the culture is going to be applied, the learning culture is going to be applied, then I'm pretty confident that we'll be getting the kids making games, working on projects, building engines, doing all the things that people need to do to actually be competent programmers on projects. So hopefully that might help.
Yeah, I could just say that we want them to be skilled and not writing thesis or hand in, I don't know, theory ideas. Yeah, we want them to code. That's what we want them to do. Yeah.
And just worth adding, the apprenticeship obviously demands it, I mean, that's the difference. So, in Sweden, typically this is an 18-month program kind of in college, isn't it, Per-Anders, and a 6-month placement. Clearly, this is the difference in the UK apprenticeship market is they're employed from day one, they're working from day one, they're applying the skills in the workplace from day one, which is, one of the big differences. And they have to be able to do that to demonstrate that they're competent against the apprenticeship standard that's been built by the game studios themselves. Yeah,
and I think the thing to remember from our point of view, or from a UK point of view, is that the Games Assembly courses have been built from the ground up by the game development community to provide game developers for themselves. The UK institutions, and there may be some people sitting on the call from UK institutions, I don't know, but the financial model is completely different, which is why we end up with people without the skills for the job. So I think the Games Assembly are kind of doing it right because it's been built by game studios, and that's what we need that in the UK, full stop, but that's hopefully what we'll get with this apprenticeship.
Yeah, definitely. I've got a question from Charlie. So would doing the apprenticeship disqualify the participant from eligibility for a student loan or a master's degree? So Charlie, on that, normally it wouldn't. However, what I'd do is recommend checking with that particular university first and foremost. So because one is an apprenticeship and one would be a degree that the student would essentially be self-funding, it does fall under different funding bandings. But some universities do see it's quite different, but definitely that's worth checking prior. And then we've got on the Kaplan website, I think it's been mentioned, but who are the levy payer, non-levy payer, and the I want to be gamer would be the learner. Yeah, so the learner would be the person that would be doing the program, and then regarding levy on non-levy players, that just depends on the size of the company that you actually work for. So they're the funding rules that the actual business would follow essentially. So if you're looking at doing the role, then you would always be the learner directly. So to any aspiring learners we've got on here that are not currently in employment, we will follow up with everyone afterwards. It'll either be myself or my colleague Kat. So you can send us your CVs and we'll get them over to the recruitment team here. Any
Great.
other questions from anyone?
No.
Well, I want to say thank you to everyone for joining today, and thank you for everyone's questions. It's really refreshing when everyone's so, I suppose, inquisitive about the course and wants to know so much information. It's definitely refreshing to hear. As I mentioned, what we'll do now is follow up with all of the details we've discussed today and some extra information. That email, like I said, will come from either myself or my colleague Kat. And then on that email, you will be able to book a meeting direct in my diary, or just email me directly regarding any questions or queries you've got. If you're wanting to move forward with it, as I mentioned, applications do need to be in by December, so it's important that we get everything over to the business within this month to make sure that cements your start date for the end of January. But other than that, thank you very much everyone for joining.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, everyone.